All right, here we go. And I thank you all for coming and for joining me in this week which lies ahead. It will be a most exciting week, spiritually exciting. I feel that spirit attracts its own audience, and I never anymore look at the list to see who's coming and who isn't coming, but I know when I arrive at the classroom that I have the audience that I need for my subject, for the subject of spirit. So I trust that, and I ask you to trust it. I ask you to trust that that has what has drawn you here and brought you here, attracted you here, that spirit which is divine love. This week our subject is the Christian Science textbook, and we are being asked to look at that textbook in a completely new way. I could say I'm asking you to look at it in a completely new way, but that would be incorrect, because we are all being asked to view the textbook in a completely new way, and being asked by our science, by divine science. If we can give birth this week to a new and enlarged sense of divine cybernetics, to a conscious awareness of what divine cybernetics means today, we will also touch a new and enlarged sense of what the Christian Science textbook is. And that textbook is the operation of the divine self-organizing principle, love. To do that means that we have to build upon everything that we have from the 6,000-year period, everything that we have been given, namely upon the perfection of consciousness, upon the perfection of the 6,000-year period consciousness, with all that that includes. The complete legacy of truth is the legacy of our consciousness and the content of our consciousness. And if we rest in that consciousness, we will find that that takes us automatically into the new 1,000-year period of love. It will take us automatically, and that automatically is not a mechanistic sense of automatically, but a cybernetic sense of automatically. It will take us naturally, it will take us irresistibly into the consciousness of perfection. The perfection of consciousness will take us into the consciousness of perfection. This is the 7,000-year period. It is a dynamic state of rest. It is a dynamic, operative, active state of being. This is the consciousness of divine cybernetics, the consciousness of divine science, and of the divine principle, love. Let us bring to our subject, then, its own nature. This is what we have to do. We have to bring to our subject, and somehow the overarching theme, the overarching principle that we consider together this week is divine love. And we have to bring like to like. And so we have to bring divine love, the consciousness, the attitude, the methods, the whole makeup of our character must be molded and shaped by divine love. And this we bring to our subject. In how far can we do that? Are you willing to attempt that with me to the best of your womanhood sense, your womanhood ability, to welcome the subject? That would mean to welcome the subject, You don't know what I'm going to say, what I will present to you, but it will be, in a way, challenging. It is a challenge whenever something new comes forth. And so, in a way, each one has the choice to either remain in the old standpoint and keep going over and over and over the same old standpoint without allowing the result of a forward movement, a forward motion, which is the scientific result of scientifically going over that which seems to be old, that which seems to be established, which is established already as our scientific paradigm, our understanding, our model of understanding, to go over and over and over that which we have scientifically, spiritually, is indeed a scientific method. And it leads to that which is new. It does not leave us where we are. It always leads to that which is new. Like produces like, and that like which is produced is something new about that which is like itself. Versus going over and over and over and over the same old ground without the spiritual quality of love, without the quality of womanhood, without that quality of womanhood that knows that there is something new at hand, something new coming, and that something new is irresistible, that we never come to the end of seeing more about science. That's the fact about the new and the old, that the new standpoint has nothing to look back to except that which is established. But when it looks back upon that which is established, it sees it as something new, not as the same thing, but as something new. Does that make any sense? This seems to come up in nearly every class that we have over the last years because it is a great issue as we move from one stage into another stage, from one age into another age, from the 6,000-year period into the 7,000-year period. What is the right method for giving birth to the 7,000-year period, or is there nothing further to give birth to? Has it all been given in the 6,000-year period, or is there something further? There is something further, and it is a completely new standpoint. And we'll see that standpoint must be made and will be made by each individual consciousness as well as the collective consciousness and consciousness universally as a whole. That this is inevitable, that it is built in to the dynamics of a living system. And that is what we are going to consider this week, that being is a living system, that the textbook is a living system, that you are a living system of consciousness, a dynamic, evolving, living system, and that you cannot resist, you cannot help but be driven, really attracted by love to the further and further stages of complexity. That this is life, and that any attempt to hold back, to hang back, not to be open, you see, not to be an open system, to close, to shut down, to close down, to say, it's all over now, it's all been given, and so I shut down and close up, that this will be driven, this standpoint will be driven out of itself. We will be driven into openness. We will be driven into a sense of being both closed and open, but correctly closed and correctly open. So we have a false sense, a wrong sense of being closed, and a wrong sense of being open, and we have a correct sense of being closed and a correct sense of being open. And what the textbook is doing is opening us up and closing us up. That the textbook takes all of that within us that is wrongly closed, all that within us that tries to be a closed system when we are inherently open. We are inherently, because of our fundamental nature, our ideational nature, we are inherently open systems. And so the textbook is showing us the way of life, the method of life for opening up, for a complete opening until we see that we are environmentally open, energetically open. And it is even dealing with the wrong sense of openness in us, that there is a wrong sense that sometimes we are just open to everything. Open to what this one says, what that one says, this teaching, this philosophy, that religion, that anything anyone says is okay, without having been disciplined and trained through the regimen of the 6,000-year period consciousness. So we are going to see that right in the first chapter of the textbook, that we will be brought to that correct sense of being organizationally closed and energetically open, environmentally open. So with the chapter prayer, we get the first great cornerstone in the textbook. The first cornerstone that equates, or that is maybe compared to the first great cornerstone in the Dorley matrix, in the matrix of John W. Dorley. And you will feel by the time we conclude our work on that chapter, well, naturally you'll feel, well, what more can there be? But there are 15 further chapters. But that first chapter will so enlarge us, will so open us up as we look at it the way we do this week, that you perhaps will not recognize it, but you will love it. I think I can say that, judging from our experience on the other coast, that we learned to love what we were seeing. Now, I am, in a way, buttering you up.
Always do that.
I always do that. So you'll come back the next session. Because in order for us to look at the textbook in this new way, I have to expose you to new terms, to a new terminology, to a new language. I say a new language, but actually the language that we will be looking at is the language of divine cybernetics. And so, in a sense, you already know this language. I'm skipping now because I have done all of that without my notes. But, so this new language is the language of divine cybernetics. And that should ring a bell with you because you are very familiar with the work of Max Kapler and the courageous work that he did in 1968 and 69 when he first presented the subject of divine cybernetics. You know that I gave you in your preparatory materials all of the references to the textbook, to the prayer chapter. I gave you all of the references to divine cybernetics, and I left it to your discretion to select, to quietly, wisely select from those materials and available resources, those resources which you were attracted to. But looking around this room, I see individuals who have been studying for many years, and so I know that most of you, many of you, are familiar with that work in 1968 and 69. As I went back over that work myself, I was struck with two different reactions. First, the complete contemporaneousness of that message. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The fact that that message was so vital, so up to date, so exact in its presentation, that anyone could listen to that recording and feel that they had a presentation that was contemporaneous, that was of the present moment. The other reaction I had was the fact that we have come to know and to accept this teaching so well. Because in 1968 and 69, Max Kapler introduced to us a whole new vernacular, a whole new language, the language of divine cybernetics. And that language wasn't found in the Bible, and it wasn't found in the textbook, term-wise, right? If we take the terms that we were given, that we have been given, the terms of divine cybernetics are not found either in the Bible or in the textbook. And so what struck me above all was the courage to present that language. The courage that it took to come into a classroom, to stand before an audience of seasoned Christian scientists who had come to hear about Christian Science and to present to such an audience a completely new language. And yet to be able to show that that language does, in fact, exist in the Bible and in the textbook as a deep structure language. I was struck by what he said at that time, because he said to us that we must be more than just metaphysicians, that we must be more than religionists, that we must be scientists. We must be scientists because if we are not scientists, we put our textbook in the deep freeze. Do you remember him saying that? Can we be divine scientists and not put our textbook into the deep freeze and leave it there, but constantly be willing to see that textbook anew? Now, I want to add to that, and I want to say, don't put your model of being in the deep freeze. Do not put the Bible in the deep freeze. your present understanding of them. Don't have the textbook on a shelf like a relic, the model of being like a relic. And you take it down, and every time you take it down, you dust it off, and then you look at it, and it looks the very same way, and you say the very same things about it. You just see the very same things about it. And then you put it back up on the shelf or down in the deep freeze. We've got to be willing to see that textbook in a completely new way. And to see then that there is a deep structure language that is continually expressing itself in a new way. That if we are rooted in the deep structure language, in the categories of being that have been presented to us in the 6,000-year period, that have been given to us through the work of John W. Dorley and Max Kepler, that then we have the deep structure language of being and reality, and that is so fundamental, so redundant, that its surface structure expression is without limitation. So since the last 28 or 29 years ago, can you just think of it, 29 years ago, that presentation. Do you think anything has happened since then? Yes, much has happened. Meanwhile, the world, too, has been advancing. We have advanced. We took up the challenge at that point in time to learn the new language of divine cybernetics as it was given to us. We learned to love it. We learned to incorporate it. Now we think really nothing of using that terminology. The terminology of homeostasis and homeoraison, of the input and the process and the output and the feedback and the whole system, the whole sense of the model of being as a model of divine cybernetics. Yeah. Meanwhile, the world too has been advancing and growing and maturing in its understanding of what reality is. The world too has been giving birth, further birth, to the idea of cybernetics, to the idea of systems theory, to the idea of the science of complexity. And so we are no longer where we were 29 years ago. The idea of what we call cybernetics has grown in the world, has advanced and matured in the world, even as our understanding of the science of being has advanced and matured. So what I want to do this week is something unique in a way, and in a way it requires, again, a great courage on both of our parts, on your part and my part. Namely, to build upon that consciousness that we already have of divine cybernetics, and to build upon that courageous presentation of Max Kepler's, that work that is already in place, that understanding of what divine cybernetics is, and to wed all of that, or much of what constitutes the present development, to wed these two together, to wed our present understanding to that which is now coming in that is completely new. Will you try that with me? Will you? So there are many new developments in the field of systems thinking, of cybernetics. Actually, you know, if you look into what is going on in the developments of the sciences, you don't find them talking so much about cybernetics, but about systems. But when you look into that which is being said, you find that everything that is being said is cybernetic in nature, and can be found in the deep structure of divine cybernetics. So what I would love to do with you, and we did it on the other coast, and by golly, we came through and we were successful, and everyone survived. I told them they would survive, and I said, it won't hurt you. How many times did I say, it won't hurt you? Open up, and they did, and it didn't. And so what we will attempt together is to look at those many new concepts that have been coming into this field. And many of these concepts I have already tried to expose you to and expose them to you over the last several years to bring in such terms as, just for instance, you've heard me speak about autocatalysis, and here and there about autopoiesis, and about fluctuations and chaos and so forth. And so what I think really the difference between what we've done already and what we will do this week, the difference is that we have in the past taken a certain term and we've talked about it and we've shown it in the context of whatever we were looking at in our subject. But what I would love to do with you now is to try to give all of these terms their place value, to give them their place value within the whole system of being, within the whole of the model of being itself. And when we do that, we will feel something tremendous. We will actually feel something cybernetic. We will witness the fact that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. That the whole genuinely is greater. So further then, I would like to illustrate that these values are system intrinsic values. Not only are these values system intrinsic to the system of being, the divine system of reference, but they are found in the textbook. The values that we will look at and discuss are found in the textbook, and if you are remaining for session 2 as well as for session 1, we will have together that very beautiful experience of discovering that, for instance, the very first chapter, prayer, is filled with these values, that it is absolutely teeming with these values. And so in looking at the textbook that way, we are not deviating from the science of being. We are not blasphemous. It's not a blasphemous thing. It's a beautiful thing. It's sheer beauty to the scientist of love. To the scientist of love. But it takes a spiritual ear to hear it. Your spiritual sense, and not merely an academic ear. It takes a spiritual ear. And so I trust you that you will not feel that I am heretical, that we are being heretical or being disloyal to the text of the textbook, disloyal to the structure of the textbook, or to anything that has been done, to any presentation that we already have of that stupendous subject. We in no way, in absolutely no way, do we invalidate any previous standpoint from which we have considered that text. But every new view enhances that which we already have. You will see it. You will experience it. That you come to love that textbook more, not less. That you come to love everything that you know and have been taught about it more and not less. So we will begin to see something completely new about the science of being. Well, I would like to take the balance of this evening to begin to introduce the overall standpoint to you. You know, they say that there is a real revolution coming in to science, into the sciences. There's a widespread feeling among the physicists, for instance, that their subject is poised for a major revolution. All of the sciences, hard and soft sciences, feel this. And what is a real revolution in a science? It isn't just the rapid advancement of technical details. To have more and more technical details with greater and greater efficiency. A real revolution in a science is a complete transformation. A transformation of the concepts upon which that science is based. And this is what they feel is taking place. Every intelligent scientist today, when he or she expresses herself about the present situation, will tell you that there is something coming, that there is an event at hand. Perhaps what I missed in my earlier notes was a very striking quote from a world scientist. You know, so many scientists today are world scientists. They are universal scientists. They don't just have that a myopic view, a one discipline view, but they take in many disciplines. They are cross-disciplinary scientists, world scientists. And one world scientist by the name of Terence McKenna, who I just happened to hear make this a quote in an interview that he was giving on a very prominent radio program. said the following. He said, something at the end of time, and we are coming to the end of time, he said, something at the end of time is calling us toward itself. And as we approach it, we become more like it. As we approach it, we experience the breakdown of our present perception of reality. Isn't that beautiful? Yeah. And so you have scientist after scientist after scientist declaring that something new is coming. No one knows what this something is. I don't know what the next 20 years will bring, or the next 10 years, or the next 5 years. But they feel that it will be of a spiritual nature. The physical scientists are saying it will be of a spiritual nature. This week I will be quoting freely, referring freely to a number of publications and books, and I thought that I would begin this evening, before starting that, by giving you the names of those books and their authors very quickly, and I will state them quickly, and if you are not able to catch them just right now, you are free to come up afterwards and to write them down. Ilya Prigozhin and Isabel Stenger's Order Out of Chaos. John Briggs and David Peat, Turbulent Mirror. John Casti, Searching for Certainty. Ludwig von Bertalanffy, General Systems Theory. Fritjof Capra, The Turning Point. Fritjof Capra, The Web of Life. And Paul Davies, The Cosmic Blueprint. Well, I want to consider with you now this shift from the 6th to the 7,000 year period and what love is bringing in. It concerns us all, and it concerns our subject. We want to look at the new developments that are coming in to what we call cybernetics. Actually, what we will see is that there is a new science coming on the world, and it is a science of love. The questions that are asked are questions about life, about being, what life is, what being is, what a living system is. They are existential questions, and they are all being answered by love. I can't tell you how many times I hear the voice in consciousness saying, love alone is life. As Mrs. Eddy says, love alone is life. And this is what we feel. A new language is emerging for the understanding of these questions and their answers. It seems that the world is filled, the universe is filled with complex, highly integrative systems of life. Highly integrative living systems. And so a new language is emerging in order to explain these highly complex integrative systems. If I say integrative, what do you hear? Love, yes. And so we have dynamical systems theory, the theory of complexity, non-linear dynamics, network dynamics, chaos theory, etc. And some of the key concepts embraced by these theories and sciences are dissipative structures, complex structures, fractals, self-organization, autopoietic networks, and chaotic attractors. Don't worry about these terms. Do not worry about these terms. We will, when we need to know a term, I will have it on the overhead projector for you, clearly for you. Don't worry about it. You will learn to love these terms. You will adore them. Believe me. So this approach, this new approach to understanding life, is being pursued by outstanding researchers around the world. And the new understanding of life may be seen as a complete change of paradigm. There's a complete change of paradigm going on, a change from the mechanistic to the ecological, world view, a love view, the ecology of love, the taking in of everything and the relatedness of everything within that one view. As I indicated to you, the common denominator in all of these approaches, the main question is, what is life? And as this question is perceived and being answered, what is emerging is a theory of living systems, a new theory of living systems. They ask really the same question that we ask. Perhaps it's the first faint appearing of the true question that we ask, what is being? What is the science of being? It's a life question, it's a science question. Can you not just love the fact that that question is being asked? It's not fully informed yet. It doesn't know that the answer, that the question and the answer are both spiritual, that there is a divine science behind both the question and the answer. But the question is being raised up in consciousness, and it is being answered with the first faint appearing of divine science, of divine love, of divine cybernetics. And so all of the answers that are coming forth are tinged with love. They are permeated with love. They are somehow answers in terms of love and of a principle that is operating, a science that is operating, that is essentially of the nature of love. So the new understanding of life is that life is of the nature of love. So we have an old paradigm that is going out, that is receding, and a new paradigm that is coming in. it's perhaps helpful to recall or to restate the definition of a paradigm. A paradigm is a constellation of concepts. What is a constellation? A group, a system really, huh? Of concepts, values, perceptions and practices shared by a community, which forms a particular vision of reality. And this is the basis of how the community organizes itself. How it organizes itself. So the paradigm that is now receding has dominated our culture for several hundred years and consists of a number of entrenched ideas and values. For instance, the view of the universe as a mechanical system, a mechanistic system composed of fundamental building blocks. This is a view, a worldview, that actually permeates our society, our culture, and everything that that society and culture views. The old paradigm is one in which the human body is thought of as a machine. It's one in which life in society is considered as a competitive struggle for existence. Do we have that? Do you recognize that anywhere? A sense of competition? Of competing to, and striving to stay ahead, get ahead, climb up over somebody else, get there first, be able to stay there, climbing the ladder of success. And it is the belief in unlimited material progress. To be achieved through economic and technological growth. And last but not least, it is the belief that a society, now I really set myself up. But it is the belief that a society in which the female is everywhere subsumed under the male is one that follows a basic law of nature. All of these aspects of the old paradigm have been challenged, they are being challenged, and a radical revision is occurring. And so we have a new paradigm coming in. The new paradigm may be called a holistic worldview, an ecological worldview, seeing the world as an integrated whole, rather than as a collection of parts. And that new view recognizes the fundamental interdependence of all phenomena. It recognizes that we are all embedded in what they call the cyclical processes of nature. Cyclical processes, well, you have to know your divine cybernetics, and you hear something, oh, if it's cyclical, if it is truly cyclical, it is cybernetic. And so the focus is changing, really with a more pronounced view, a more pronounced aspect of that which is of a cybernetic nature. So we have the two terms, holistic and ecological. And holistic is perhaps a little bit less appropriate to describe the new paradigm. This is what Fritjof Capra says. He says a holistic view means to see something as a functional whole and to understand the interdependence of its parts. Did you get that? Should I say it again? A holistic view is to see something as a functional whole and to understand the interdependence of its so-called parts. An ecological view of something includes the holistic view, but adds to it the perception of how that something is embedded in its natural environment. Okay, we'll talk about it. Don't worry. Actually, we're going to see there are two directions. Two directions, but we'll build it up just a bit more here. The anti-ecological nature of our social and economic structures, he says, and our technologies is rooted in the dominator system. The dominator system of social organization. Patriarchy. Patriarchy, and that gives us examples, he says, of social domination that are both exploitive and anti-ecological. Well, what he's bringing out here is actually what we know. He says that there is, if there is an imbalance between the male qualities and the female qualities, what do we know about that? If there is an imbalance between the 6,000-year period quality within us and the 7,000-year period quality within us, this leads to the domination of one over the other. And when you get the domination of one over the other, this is the dominator, the patriarchy, the false sense of hierarchy. It has to do with using a situation, using nature, exploiting nature, using individuals, using situations, using everything. It's exactly what we find if we try to have truth without love. If we do not move naturally, effortlessly, in an unresisting way into the 7,000-year period, but we try to hold back, if there's something within us that's a resistance factor that is holding back to the 6,000-year period, saying, I love that 6,000-year period, I want to stay with it, I love all the accomplishments of it, I was successful in that period, I want to continue to be successful, I want to be successful again in the same way that I was successful before. This is unprogressive. This is unprogressive, because if you have fulfilled in consciousness the parameters of the 6,000-year period, you are majestically moved into the 7,000-year period. And it's absolutely impersonal. It's the impersonal working of a cybernetic principle, a divine cybernetic principle. But if there's something within us that resists that, then we find that we are hanging back, holding back to the former paradigm. And so they see that the new paradigm, we call it the paradigm of love, shall we? That the new paradigm has new values. New values. And the shift requires an expansion within us. An expansion not only of our perceptions and the ways that we think, but an expansion of our values, a change of our values. What do we value? That's the question. So there is a striking connection in the changes between thinking and values, and we are going to look at that in the next few minutes.